Greetings. My name is Dr. Zebulon Maletsky. I'm the Chair of Marketing and PR for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History and the Executive Producer of Asala TV. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our series in Retrospect and Prospect, Topics in African American Life and History, produced, edited, and hosted by our very own Dr. Lopez Matthews, Chair of the Publications Committee for Asala. Dr. Lopez writes, in remembering Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Mary McLeod Bethune wrote the article, The Negro in Retrospect and Prospect. In this piece, she examined the past, foretold the future, and issued a challenge to the post-war informed and educated Black American citizenry. In this spirit, we speak to interesting figures in the Black community to discuss the past, the present, and what we imagine the future will hold. We hope you'll continue to join us and enjoy this series. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lopez Matthews, Chair of the Publications Committee for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And I'm here today with Vedet Coleman-Robinson, the Executive Director of the Association of African American Museums. And today we are here to discuss the role of cultural institutions in the African American community. And so thank you for being with us today, Vedet.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's no problem. You're a wonderful person to talk to. And so, I just want to get right into it. And so my first question is, what role historically have African American cultural institutions played in supporting the African American community?
Well, for AAAM, which is the Association of African American Museums, we've been around for 42 years. And we have really been of the community from the start. We make it a point since our founding to pretty much all of our museums were established in communities. So in African American communities, I really probably should say that part. So there was a lot of rallying around our museums, like the DeSable Museum, Charles H. Wright Museum, the Smithsonian's Anacostia Museum. All of these museums are in locations that are historically African American communities. Now, what I'm not sure is how things are going with gentrification right now, but they were historically African American communities, and these museums pulled their collections, majority of them, from the community, and they had to be one with the community in order to maintain the support of Lifting as We Climb, and then also maintain support from the community when they have events. So our museums have, they came out of like a protest movement, which is sort of kind of like where we are and where we see ourselves today. So if an African American museum popped up during the protests of today in 2020, with all of the social injustice and civil unrest with against police brutality, I would not be surprised, because this is, who we are at our core. So we've always done the work. We've always supported the community and communities. And the thing that's different about our AAAM museums are a lot of our African American museums have programming and exhibits so that Black people in their neighborhoods, in their respective neighborhoods, can see themselves in a positive manner. A lot of the exhibits, the traveling exhibits, they go from one African American museum to another. And then also, they now, because of the interest, and when I say now, I mean maybe in the past 20 years, there have been exhibits that have gone into mainstream museums. But again, the thing that is important to always draw home is that our museums our member museums in AAAM have always been of the community and have supported the community in some way. Let me give you a quick example of something that has happened, and I've shared this with several folks over the past couple of weeks. In Memphis, there was a peaceful protest, and the participants in this protest walked from, I'm going to say, like, let's say that they started at the State House or something. They ended at the National Civil Rights Museum. That was their stopping point. And the National Civil Rights Museum created some programming during COVID, all outside, just for people to have conversations, rapid response conversations about what's going on. And that's really been something that we've always done. Anytime there is a need for African Americans to gather and feel safe, they have been able to come to our museums for that. Community events happen in our museums. Our museums are usually beacons of hope and safe havens for families that need them. So during COVID and historically, that's what we've been doing.
That's so great. And I'm glad that you mentioned that the museums are of the community and built by the people, because, you know, that is one of the great things about African American history that I love, that a lot of it came from African Americans who were practicing self-determination. They said that we don't need you to preserve our history. We know what's important. We know what we would like to see. And so they started preserving their own history. And so, you know, I'm so thankful that our Black museums exist. And so, you know, how has AAAM, the organization, supported these museums as they have supported their community?
So what we've done, well, historically, what we used to do in the beginning of the establishment of AAAM, we're still kind of there to our core, which is we bring our museums together to have discussions about what it looks like on the ground. What are some things that you need in your communities? And comparing and contrasting of what one museum might be doing that might be a little different than another museum, and how you can implement those seeds in your own museum. So something, us being historians, right, we can kind of appreciate this trend, but the trend and the dips and dives and all of that. But one thing that has always stood out to me about AAAM is when we first started, John Kennard was the first African American director of a Smithsonian institution. So that was the Anacostia Museum that I discussed earlier. And when he came together with his colleagues, he brought the wisdom that he learned from Smithsonian to the rest of his colleagues, just to say, hey, look, I know what you're doing in your museums, but I'm doing this at the Smithsonian, and I've learned this at the Smithsonian. So let's all start implementing these things. So nobody can say, not that it really kind of matter, but nobody can say that you don't matter. And you know, nobody can say that you're not relevant, because you are relevant. You're doing the stuff. And, you know, just like our HBCUs, which I tell people all the time, like, it amazes me that people are like, HBCUs do historic preservation? Duh, majority of them are over 150 years old, you know? So it's like, yes, they've been doing historic preservation and have been doing it well with almost no means, right? Or limited means. So it's the same thing with our museum. So during our annual conferences, we're really about each one teach one, each one reach one. And really just sewing into one another. And our conferences are very similar to a Solace conference, where it's a family reunion. Our family reunion just happens to be museum professionals. And we really do make sure that everybody walks away with a little bit more than what they came in with. And then how we support them in their communities throughout the year now, right? So throughout the year, as our member organization, or as our member museums are having events, we share those far and wide. We also make sure that we have some professional development for our museum professionals. And we just try to really keep our ear out for what the needs are. And then right now, right, during COVID, everything shut down. So, you know, it was an interesting pivot because our museums were temporarily closed. Spirits were down, but we all knew that, you know, after we got over the fact that the doors were closed, Lopez, we all knew that this has not been our first rodeo. Although it has not been a global pandemic, to say the least, we have always been faced with something. And the tenacity of our members really goes back to, you know, having the roots of being African American and always having to pull yourself up and figure out interesting ways and being innovative of how to make money to keep your doors open. So that's pretty much what folks have been doing. Folks have been pivoting to Zoom calls like you and I are having right now, and doing public programming. AAAM has been doing some of the same stuff as an organization. So although the doors are closed temporarily, we find ourselves pivoting and having some resilience, and just making it work, because you can't bury your head in the sand, right?
True. And you kind of answered my next question, so I'll have to read. Because
look at me, A+.
That's right, you're on it. My next question was about just how, you know, museums are managing during our current, you know, global crisis. I mean, we have COVID-19, we just shut our doors. Now we have protesting all over the world in support of Black lives and saying, you know, Black lives matter too, and that the world needs to understand that. I think that that's what some of the critics of Black Lives Matter kind of miss, that it's not about just saying Black people matter, it's about saying Black lives matter too. We know everyone's lives matter, but we want to ensure that you understand that Black lives matter too. And so that's, you know, what is driving all of this. And so how are our museums and our cultural institutions documenting and preserving our legacy? Or how do you see them going forward with preserving and documenting our legacy with all of this in mind?
So at first there was this hesitation, well, not really hesitation, but more looking at things like, if this were a situation where, you know, you receive a donation, not monetary, but a donation of an artifact or something like that, for something for your collection, how would you do that safely? So a lot of our museums were looking at historical trends and looking to see how it looked when, you know, when the anthrax scares were big, you know, in the United States, where people were just sending envelopes full of anthrax to people. So a lot of our former board members were having conversations with us about what that looked like, and how our museums can implement some of those practices to stay safe. And then we kind of also start having conversations about how to, again, have programming and all of that. But what wound up happening is I've been seeing our museums, because they're doing a lot more programming, and because majority of my museums are history museums. We do have a few art museums, but because so many of my museums are history museums, you cannot turn your eyes away or your back on what's happening right now with just making sure that the world understands that Black lives do matter, and yes, comma too. So what has been happening is people have been collecting, and I'm hoping they're using their gloves and they have their masks on and all of that. But we have been collecting. We've been doing calls for collections. I'm actually putting together a document right now for members, just so I can know who's collecting, because that's going to be a big thing for funders. They're going to want to know who's been collecting through COVID and who's also been collecting, protest signs during, this new, well, not new, but the protest. This particular protest is new. Let's just also say that this protest is so historical because there's different genders, more so there's different races. I've seen just about every single race being represented during this protest. It's generational. People are out there with their grandparents, great-grands if they're alive, their children. It's just all across the board. So this protest is way different than the protests that we had in the 60s, where they were mainly African Americans and a few allies. But there are droves of people out there now. So the pictures of today for 2020 are going to look way different. But you'll be able to, in a museum, put them side by side and kind of see what the difference is. And I'm looking forward to that, to see, how all of our cities have been just rallying around one another. And it's nice. It is a nice thing to see. I just hate that it's on the heels of another African American dying because of police negligence. But there's no but. I'm happy that we are in a time that we are now, Lopez, and as historians, we're out here trying. You're doing these videos, so we're trying to capture what's going on around us, and our museums are doing the same thing.
Well, that's wonderful, and that's a great segue into my next question, which is, how can regular people support these institutions? They're all over the country. African Americans are looking to, and allies are looking to support Black businesses, and museums are, they're cultural institutions, but they are Black businesses. And so how can people support our cultural institutions during this time?
I do a lot of exactly this, telling people who are interested, how can I help? How can I help as an ally? How can I help? How can I help? And I always say, just give a donation. You can give a donation at AAAM so we can continue our mission and make sure that our museums are always, up to trend, and have their fingers on the pulse, and making sure that we can give them great programming. But you can also make donations to the museums directly, and that can be $1, $5, $10, $100. It could be whatever you can afford. And I think one of the things that happens a lot in our community is we tend to think that if I don't have millions of dollars, I can't donate. But look at how President Obama's campaign took off with $5 here and $5 there, and that's the same thing for our museums. The other thing is time. So while you can't, maybe you can't go into a museum right now and volunteer in the way in which you would have if you wanted to be a docent, you can do very interesting things like speak to the executive director and ask them, hey, can I interview your staff to see how they feel during this time and what they plan on doing going forward. I would love to do that pro bono for you. Is there anything that you need me to do, you know, to help you overhaul your website, or whatever your talent is? You know, we have a few people who have contacted us and asked us, like, hey, can we volunteer and just look at your website and look at ways that we can you know, that can help benefit a revamp? And I'm open to it because I like the idea of, you know, if there's something that I'm missing, I would like fresh eyes on things. So there's things like that folks who are not in the field but have a love for museums can do. Another heartwarming story is there was a young man who was just like, I want to help. I don't know what I can do, but his background is in literature, and he's a wonderful writer. So, you know, for that, I said, well, how about I give you some of our books, right? And you go through them and just really find out, like, figure out a great way to make our history on our website shush it a little bit, or look at, we just rolled out our emerging museum professionals. That's a new membership level that we've never had. And I just asked them to look at that because we just need to hurry up and get it out, you know? So I was just like, take a minute, look at that and figure out what you think would sound right or be better. So that's what he's doing for us. So it's really about what your talent is and figuring out how you can assist the museums as well. Because one thing that people don't really realize is, you know, museums need every discipline, right? Some folks just think it's just the executive director and a curator, but they don't realize there's a finance well, you know, sometimes they do realize that there's a finance person, but there's just all disciplines are in museums. So you can literally get in where you fit in, you know, if you wanted to give the time. So that's what I would say to anyone who's asking, how can I help, but they don't have the money. Or you can find a donor who can donate on your behalf. And there you have it.
That's great. Now, I'm going to add in another question.
Okay.
And you have a beautiful Zoom background behind you.
Oh.
What is this picture that you are using as your Zoom background?
So this picture is not my house. This is the Northwest African-American Museum in Seattle, and the exhibit is called Iconic Women. So there's different artists in it, and I have to get that from the museum. But one thing that I'm doing for our members is I'm featuring a new museum weekly to just give them some visibility. And it's a nice conversation starter. I mean, you asked, everybody has asked. And before this, I had the Reginald F. Lewis in the background, their Elizabeth Catlett collection. So I'm sorry that we didn't, I probably should have put that up for this meeting because it's really, you know, it makes sense. We're both in Maryland. And then before that was Gallery Mertis. So it's been really nice to be able to highlight what we do. And it's just it gives you the warm fuzzies. So, you know, I'm all about that, like just making sure that everybody is visible.
Great. That's so wonderful. And thank you for giving that explanation. So what is one thing you want our viewers to take away from this discussion?
I think the main thing that I would love our viewers to take away is that although these times seem dismal, there's hope, right? There's hope on the other side. There's hope in humanity. You know, I look at what's going on now, Lopez, and I've seen Americans rallying together in a way that I've never witnessed. being on this earth. And I'm sure my mother and our grandparents and ancestors never witnessed. So I feel like that would be my takeaway. There's hope. There's sunshine at the end of the rainbow. There's a pot of gold. Well, maybe not, but you know, we could be hopeful that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But I feel that that's the main thing, right? We're all still at home. And there's some challenges with that. Everybody's, you know, the sun's out. It's starting to be summer. And we still have to walk around in these hot masks so that we don't catch anything. But, you know, but at least because, you know, we still have hope.
Exactly. Hey, and that's one thing that, you know, we need to keep and we always need to have is hope. And so I think that that is a great message to take with us. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that if you enjoyed our conversation today, and we talked about supporting our organizations, if you would like to donate to support the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, you can visit us at www.aslh.org/donate, and you can choose the area that you would like to donate to. And so thank you all for watching today, and I hope you have enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Lopez. Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks again for watching. We hope you enjoyed this broadcast. We'd like to remind you to subscribe to Asala TV, and you can also hit that notification bell to remind you of future broadcasts and episodes. We'd also like to ask you to consider making a donation to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. If this information touched you, or if you learned something today, please consider making a donation no matter how big or small. You may make a donation by hitting the donate button in the description on the YouTube page for Asala TV. We thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in a future broadcast.